7:33 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, let's put the focus on children now, because with the pandemic there are many areas of concern, and indeed children, vulnerability, education opportunities, safety, and the issue of violence against children in a time of not just the pandemic but economic challenges and so many other issues. And it's a major concern, and stakeholders have been trying to assist parents and caregivers to be on the alert for such acts of violence. Well, to give us some perspective at a time when we're concerned about the safety of women and girls with International Women's Day, we're joined now by Candice Wallace, a child protection officer with UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Funds, with responsibility for the Eastern Caribbean. It's headquartered in Barbados, but she's speaking to us from headquarters here in Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Wallace, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Good to have you here with us. So let's talk about this issue of gender-based violence against children, and what specific issues would you like to highlight? Because there are many areas that we could focus upon. Where would you like to start our discussion?
I think I want to start by just explaining that gender-based violence against children, because normally people think about child abuse. But when you talk about gender-based violence, they go to adults, they go to women in particular, but they don't link children to gender-based violence. So I just wanted to clarify and point out that, there are different forms of gender-based violence that children face, and that could be physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. And it happens in all countries and in any setting, especially in children's homes or communities, school, and particularly online. And the fact that we are now mostly online because of COVID-19 and online education, then I want to raise that point as well. And of course, you know that many boys and girls, the violence normally comes from persons that they trust and that they know. So it's normally their parents or their caregivers, sometimes their teachers or their neighbors. So today I want to just drive home the point that it is our responsibility as adults to be able to protect children and the different ways and which we can do so.
And before we develop that point even further about that responsibility fundamentally to protect children rather than abuse them, is there any evidence, is there any data in our region to show that the situation has worsened during this time of the pandemic?
I think in terms of regionally, we have not seen evidence in terms of sexual abuse, but what we have seen increase is emotional abuse and physical abuse. Of course, we have to take this with, in the light that at the end of the day, children are within homes. So whereas before they can be in different places where other persons might be able to identify signs of abuse, this is not the case now. But what has been reported just shows the increase in terms of physical and emotional abuse.
So let's give ourselves some pointers and some reminders. What are we looking for to identify signs of abuse, and what preventive measures can we put in place to protect children?
Oh, sure. Well, the first thing is maintaining or creating a positive and open communication with your child. I think that's key. That way you have first discussions about body safety, about what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. That child feels like I can come to you in times of difficulty, in times when I feel scared, and I know that you have my back. Basically, that's what you want to start off with, that foundation of creating open communication. And then, we have a saying in the Caribbean, good secret, bad secret. We want to do away with that mentality. What you need to teach children is that there are no secrets, basically. No secrets is the best way to go. That way they don't have to try to struggle between what is a bad secret and what is a good secret. So you do away with secrets within the household. Look out for signs of grooming. You would see, adults coming around a child, befriending a child, which might seem strange, bringing extravagant gifts, also trying to isolate the child, always want to take the child somewhere or come by me and spend some time, and those kind of things. I mean, in the gist of it all, you can't isolate one thing and say this is a cause for reason, but at the same time, being able to be mindful and vigilant in terms of how other adults and how the children act with that adult around. seeing how, that can be a point as well. Parents, I know that right now it's COVID-19. Most of us are called out to work while we have our children home being supervised by someone else. Make sure that that person is a trusted person. Make sure before you leave, you talk to your child. And you can't talk to your child every day about it before you leave. Make it a routine. Say, okay, you know what, I'm leaving. If this happens, this is what you do. Or, when you come back home, you also find out how was your day, what happened, and have that communication with your child to make sure. And also tell the adult that you're leaving the child with that I've had this conversation with my child. Yeah, so they themselves have to second guess themselves. But in most cases, as much as possible, if you can reduce alone time with children, that will be ideal, right? But I know it's a bit difficult now in time of COVID. If you realize the signs of abuse, and you need to learn it, and there are a lot of resources out there. You could go to Children's Authority's website, UNICEF's website, and just learn the different signs of abuse. And most likely you would see physical injuries, of course, if it's physical abuse, but there's also change in personality of the child, or bedwetting, for instance, or display of knowledge of sexual behavior, or even language that is totally inappropriate for that child, right? So those are signs that when you pay attention to those signs, then you can call children's authorities, not for you to investigate to determine whether this is true or not, but if you are suspicious, the first thing that you should do is call the authorities. Right?
And Ms. Wallace, if you'll allow me just to get some clarification. That's okay. I mean, I know there's a wealth of information you want to provide, and there's so much that has to be said about this. But for the purposes of our discussion, when we talk about a child, are we talking about someone 18 and under? Because so often when we have a discussion like this, people think of 5 and 6 year olds and so on, and not realize that we're talking about teenagers as well, who are even more exposed to adult type behaviors and values and so on. So for the purposes of our discussion, just clarify the age group that we're talking about here.
So, according to the Convention on the Rights of a Child, and also our legislation in Trinidad, a child is defined as any person under the age of 18. So you're counting from 0 to 17. That is a child. So when I refer to these things, these are things that we have to look at as well, across the spectrum. Because like I said, it doesn't discriminate concerning age or gender or socioeconomic status or country, or religion. It happens across the spectrum, and this is what we've seen globally.
And Ms. Wallace, are we seeing that the whether it's the sexual abuse or the grooming or the exploitation, that in the case of girls especially, that they are more vulnerable in their teenage years? Because you hear it all the time, but there's a girl, there's a woman that, look at how she's looking, and all that sort of thing. All of that inappropriate dialogue that goes on, that seems to be an accepted part of our culture, of our mainstream media as well. How difficult is it to police something like that?
Well, the thing is, I mean, there are other things that needs to be done to coincide with what I'm speaking to you about. So from this perspective, I'm really talking to the adults or the parents or the caregivers within the household. But there's a whole of society approach when it comes to protecting children, which means that we really have to get down to the root of the problem, which are normally our norms and our values and how we see women, gender inequality, and those things, and sexual education as well. Those things we need to be able to embed as early childhood education. So, at the age of 3, a child should be able to know how to identify different parts of their body and know what is a good touch or a bad touch, or inappropriate, I should say, touch, and an appropriate touch. And these are things that you teach your children all the time. Right? And this is boys and girls, because a lot of times we talk about girls, yes, and the facts are that a lot of the girls are subject to sexual violence, but you're learning more and more that boys are also subject to the same violence, and may not be at the same prevalence, but at the same time, men are stepping forward these days and are indicating that when they were a child, they were sexually abused by an adult in the household. So these are things we have to pay attention to, both with both sexes.
And when we look at all these situations, especially as you mentioned, the challenging times of COVID that we are in right now, we would all like to think, Ms. Wallace, that we have the circumstances and the wherewithal to have our children monitored all the time. But that hardly happens in the real world. People are doing 2 jobs, they're working difficult hours, different hours, so the children unfortunately are left unattended. Therefore that creates that space for online predators, for real life predators, or all these sorts of things. Therefore, sometimes I'm sure parents in those situations may feel almost overwhelmed with what is being required of them. How do they cope? How do they cope in a situation like that?
Well, I would start off by saying take care of yourself. I think it is an overwhelming time. There are a lot of stresses, brought about by COVID-19, the loss of jobs. This is a time that you have to, they always say, if a plane going down, you put on your safety gear and then you take care of your child without you being 100% there, 100% rested, 100% open for this discussion or communication, 100% present. Then, these things tend to slip through the crack. And so therefore I would start off by saying, please take care of yourself. Remember, I mentioned not only sexual abuse, but physical abuse. And I just wanted to drive home this point. A lot of the physical abuse happens from the parents themselves. And in light of that, positive behavioral measures, or positive discipline. Look at different methods that you can use. And of course, de-stressing before you start to correct the unwanted behavior is something that is key. Of course, having safety plans, or, just like if a disaster, you have a safety plan, everybody knows this is where we go to the muster point. You may not be present in the home, but if you have a safety plan or a code word that when you're talking to a child during the course of the day, they can, say the code word to know that something is wrong in the household. That is something that you can do to help you in terms of preparation. Of course, online, we try to drive home what you call SEAL. If you practice SEAL, and when we say SEAL, we're talking about S for social media monitoring. So if you could supervise your children in terms of activities, including browser history, enabling child-friendly profiles and parental controls. Some of the apps have privacy settings, family safety modes. That is E, enabling child-friendly profiles, E. And A, agree on appropriate online behavior. What is appropriate? What is allowed? What is not allowed? What sites can that child visit? What content should they expect in terms of messages, or they themselves give in terms of their messages that they send to other persons, in terms of sharing their photos or giving information about where they live and those kind of things. So speak to them about that. And also what to do in the event of, inappropriate messages, if they contact you, who they contact, if there's cyberbullying, how to block someone. Those are key things that you need to also put in place. And of course, L means that you need to take the time to learn about the apps. Learn about the social media platforms that your children are using, right? And also there are so much additional information or resources out there concerning how you can safeguard children while they are online. And I just take the opportunity to let parents know that these are things that could support you. In light of what you've asked, there are also support systems, where you feel overwhelmed. You can call Childline. Childline has e-counseling services. It's available 24 hours at any point. You could just call them and say, okay, I'm feeling stressed. Even if you don't want to talk to them, you could call them, and there's a storytelling part to their programming where they actually just take on the responsibility of telling the child and engaging that child for a period of time. Probably you need to reboot, So there are systems out there that can support parents. Can I go ahead and speak about the My Childline app? That's something that UNICEF has supported.
Please, go right ahead.
One of our partners. Yes?
Yes.
And it's an app that you can download on your phone. It's available on Google Play Store, on iPhone. And when you download the app, this is something that is readily available. You can have it attached to your children's tablet as well. If during the course of the day they need a boost, they feel confused, they feel scared, they need help, all of the hotlines, the free hotlines. So you have Children's Authority, you have the Counter Trafficking Unit, you have Child Protection Unit, you have all those free hotline services readily available and emergency numbers readily available by just a click of a button on that app. I think this is a really resourceful tool that everybody should have on their phones and on their children's tablets so that their children will be able to have access to necessary support. So it's not just you alone, and build your network in your communities as well. Have your neighbors look out for you, have your friends look out for you. Sometimes you need to just drop home, in between. If you can run away, unannounced, drop home and do a drive-by, if you want to call it that, to see how what is happening within the home while you are not there. It's much, but we need to start reaching out before we know. We used to always say it takes a village to raise a child, and it also takes a village to protect one. So, reach out to those networks. Of course, there's Children's Authorities hotline, and that's 996 or 800-2014. And that gives you, access to online health services. To direct services in terms of protection of your children as well.
And Ms. Wallace, maybe I have a dangerously devious mind as well, because while you're having this discussion, I'm thinking that if I were a parent at the stage where I have young children in the house, and I come and say, let me see your phone, let me see your tablet, everything seems to be okay, because it looks okay, because whoever is the deviant that I've been in communication with has showed me how to close it down, how to prevent my parents from finding it, how to lock it off without my parents being able to know, because they're not technologically savvy, and that therefore I think everything is fine when somewhere inside that device it is locked off to where I can't access it.
Understood. And that's possible, but like I said, remember that acronym that I use, SEAL? One of it is concerning checking browser histories. Sometimes, yes, you might be able to delete certain things, but at the same time, if you have family safety modes established, so for instance, just use my personal example. Google allows you to create a family profile for your child. So for instance, every time she logs into that particular, into her Gmail account, it notifies me that she's there, or if she's downloading an app, it also notifies me. I am able to see and browse her history, even with it being deleted from her side because it's linked to my profile. So just learning about these apps and learning about these back ends, so you can, get one up on the social media platforms.
I hear you on that.
Take the time to learn, because it's part of reality right now, and it's part of safeguarding your children as well.
Absolutely. And in the couple of minutes that we have, at the end of the day, it comes down to trust, doesn't it? Between the parent and the child, that the child will not feel threatened, that you're minding their business, but you are essentially seeking their safety, and ultimately well-being. That's what it's all about.
Yes, and that's why I started off by the premise of open and honest communication. I think once you have that foundation, it's very clear that children will be able to feel safe to come to talk to you about any signs, because yes, sometimes it might happen right away, but sometimes there's a stage of grooming, there's a stage of building trust, there's a stage of let me talk to you, and those kind of things. And from the onset, that child will feel comfortable to come to their parents to say, this is what has happened, or I found that this person watched me strange, or I felt uncomfortable when this person did this, or those kind of things. That's the type of relationship that you want to nurture with your children.
And before we go, and we really thank you for taking the time to give us all these important bits of advice in relation to providing a safe space for our children, male and female, and indeed all the way up to the age of 17, 18, and indeed, of course, as adults, we have specific responsibilities. Just give us a couple of those contact numbers again, or websites for anyone who would like to get advice and guidance in these various issues.
Of course. So Childline, their number is 131. 131. So you can write it up, put it on a sticky note on your fridge so everybody has access to it. And Children's Authority's number is 996. So that's 996. And of course, I implore you to download the My Childline app, which can give you access to all of the other numbers and emergency contacts that you need, just at the click of a button.
Candice Wallace,
and that's available on Google and iPhone.
Indeed. Candice Wallace, thank you very much for taking the time to offer this very important bit of advice to us. And hopefully, many of our viewers would have gotten some important tips in the course of our discussion. Thanks very much once again.
Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. Dealing with a very serious issue of protection of children, especially in these challenging times with so many dangers lurking not just in real life but online, which probably is the real danger these days. As we go to the break at 7:53, here's a sunset image that has been sent to us by a viewer, another one of those beautiful sunsets. So it's a bit of a haziness, a bit of a dustiness from maybe a bit of Sahara dust as well, although the rains would have died things down a bit in relation to the dust as we go to the break.